Hi, my name is Wanda Gilbert Coker. Welcome to the Imagination session of the Housing Bill of Rights for the North Carolina Statewide Housing Justice Network. Grateful to see each and every one of you today. Like I said, if I didn't say before, I am your moderator, Wanda Gilbert Coker. We have come here today to use our imaginations to think about what we want to see, all the possibilities, to have an open mind, and to put it in writing. People I work with in the community and organizing, they will hear me say often, we often complain about what we don't like. But here's an opportunity to put in writing what we want to see. And, we hear it often, write the vision, make it plain. Well, here's an opportunity for us to write the vision and make it plain, and also to put it in after we make it plain, to make it plain to the community, make it plain to the people who write policies for us in the on the statewide level, and also in the community citywide level. And so it's an opportunity for us to use this information on various levels for us to come together and make sure that everyone has a voice in the community. So thank you again. For those who want some background about what this process is about, it's to break the cycle of housing and instability and displacement of houselessness. And we need a sweeping policy change that guarantees safe and stable housing for everyone. And I hope everyone here can agree that housing is a human right and it's necessary. So we're going to go ahead and move into the first part of the agenda and the introductions. You all should have received a packet. And if you have not, please put in the chat. Someone will email it to you, but when you signed up, you should have received the packet with the agenda and also about how this process is going to move forward for the end of until we get to the end. So the first in the beginning, let's see. I just want to go on to the first part. Bree, we're going to hear from Bree Newsom Bass. She is a grassroots organizer and movement builder who has helped facilitate the formation of the Statewide Housing Justice Network. And Bree will give us a background on the Statewide Housing Justice Network and the purpose of this gathering. And so, welcome, Bree.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much, Ms. Wanda. Thank you, everybody who is here. I don't take any more time beyond saying amen to everything that Wanda said. Let me just share real quick some slides. Can everybody see that? Is that showing up properly? Let's see. So just briefly, the Statewide Housing Justice Network, I mean, we're literally that. We are a network of grassroots organizers from across the state. We first came together. I started organizing around the housing issue in Charlotte, kind of responding to the situation locally there. And we realized, the folks I was working with there around the end of 2018, 2019, that we really needed to connect with other people across the state. There were some things that we were trying to address at a citywide level, but also recognized, of course, that things have to change at the state level and the federal level. And so in the beginning of 2020, that was the conversation that we started having. And then the pandemic hit. So we went from obviously a situation that was already a crisis to an even more dire crisis as we were facing these mass evictions because of the pandemic. And so the very first thing that we started organizing around was the Need a Home to Stay at Home campaign, which was basically saying, like, as this pandemic is going on, and at that point in time, the government was saying people need to stay at home. our whole argument was, obviously you can't tell people to stay at home and put people out of their homes at the same time. And so that was what that campaign was around. Also, of course, connected to national calls for canceling rent, calling for eviction moratoriums. And this is our solidarity statement. We express solidarity with other movements for social justice and equity, and we recognize the connection between these movements and the campaign for housing justice. We affirm the humanity and dignity of all people, regardless of race, ethnicity, class, gender, religious affiliation, sexual orientation, or citizenship status. The goal is to build a mass movement. So just very briefly, so you kind of have an understanding, again, we are not a formalized organization. We are a network of people from across the state who have been meeting and conferring with each other. And so this is kind of what it looks like. It's various local organizations, local campaigns, conferring around a consensus-based statewide campaign and mobilizations, and then sharing strategy, tactics, resources, and language with each other. As one example, we all had a statewide mobilization at one point to Alamance County to show up in support of someone who was facing eviction there. We've also done statewide direct action on the same day in various locations. And the whole point, of course, is to show that we can coordinate with each other, and through showing that, hopefully apply pressure at the state and federal level. I mentioned the Need at Home to Stay at Home campaign. We've also been trying to support rapid response efforts, so building a network that can mobilize statewide to provide court support, mutual aid, and direct action. And then the Housing Bill of Rights, which is the conversation we are going to have tonight. This is also a conversation that's bubbling up nationally. People are talking about this everywhere, the need for some form of Bill of Rights. We've seen the, People's Action, nationally is calling for a tenants bill of rights, which is the same kind of idea. So this conversation that we're having tonight is occurring with conversations that people are having around the country. And the whole idea, of course, is that we declare housing a human right, and we demand an end to the cycle of housing instability and houselessness by guaranteeing certain rights and protections for all tenants. Very quickly, there's the what and there's the how, right? So the what is guaranteed housing for all, which is supported by a stated housing bill of rights. The how is campaigns, tactics, direct actions, messaging, mobilizations, tenant associations, grassroots organization, political education. It's obviously many different things. And the how of it is a longer conversation that is ongoing. Tonight, though, we're really kind of focusing in on the what, because we want to see where we are in terms of the general consensus around the state on what our top demands are, or what those top things are that we need to see change structurally. And so the outcome of this conversation, this particular conversation, is to create a zine that we can use for education and movement building. The one that you see right here is one that was put together by Refund Raleigh. They did this really great zine that's about the history of police violence in Raleigh and spelling out the struggle ahead, explaining the movement. We want to do something similar around the housing movement and the Housing Bill of Rights. And this is an overview of what we see as going into the Housing Bill of Rights. By the way, I know I'm throwing like a lot out right now. We will later in our conversation talk more about this, because we definitely want to get all of your input and questions and thoughts on this. But this is kind of an overview of what we see going into that Bill of Rights, talking about who is impacted, giving an explanation of systemic racism, having some testimonies of people from different regions, the Housing Bill of Rights, that's what we have highlighted there. What we see is identifying maybe those top 10 things that we all agree are some of the most urgent needs, and those would get featured in the zine. It's not that we are eliminating anything. It's not that we're saying even that something is necessarily more important or more necessary, but if we're trying to help people in our communities understand this concept of radically transforming the system. What are those top 10 things we would want to see elevated in an educational zine like this? We would also have in there questions to consider, things for people to think about when they get the zine and they're reading through it, for them to think about how would their life be improved by a housing bill of rights? What kind of protections do they need as tenants? We would list basic know your rights in there for people to have. We want to give people some system analysis, understanding how housing intersects with all of these other issues, explaining eviction, the process of gentrification and displacement, the state of public housing, talking about farmland loss that's happening in our more rural communities, and different ways that people are organizing themselves right now. And then finally, the zine is a living collaborative document, right? So we're not asking for the outcome of this conversation to be the be all and end all of this conversation around housing bill of rights. This is more of a conversation starter. We want to start having this conversation in communities all across our state and inviting people to participate in this conversation, add to the ideas as we continue to build. And then finally, the timeline that we're looking at, of course, right now in September, we're having this imagination session. October is when we would like to start publishing and distributing the zine and launching a website and social media to support the zine and the publication. We'll have it in print form and also online and digital format. And then beyond October, I mean, that's where the how comes in. That's where the real work comes in. As we continue to connect and strategize and mobilize as needed, we want to build a network of people to help with rapid response, mobilizations, court support, tenant association formations, and direct action. And of course, these are things that everybody has already been doing. If you're on this call, I'm sure it's because you have already been doing this. The question is just, how do we scale? How do we build capacity? How do we bring more people into the fold? And we're hoping that the zine can play a role in that. And the ultimate goal is to work with organizations statewide to build the infrastructure needed to sustain mass movement and assist tenants. So on that note, I'm going to hand it back over to Ms. Wanda. And like I said, if you have like questions or thoughts, we're definitely going to have more time to talk about it, but just so we're all on the same page about what this conversation is that we're about to have now.
Thank you for that, Bree. And before we go any further, I just want to give respect and props to those who are helping us in the background. We could not do this without a great production team. And so shout out to Greg, GQ, and Jasmine for helping us bring this together as a group. So I just want to give them a bunch of love. So as we move forward, we have some great presenters. And our next presenter will be the amazing Yolanda Taylor. Yolanda, that was my country accent, Yolanda. Yolanda Taylor is a community advocate and strategist, formerly an attorney with legal aid who continues to provide counseling to tenants facing eviction. Yolanda will lead us in the grounding space. So welcome, Yolanda.
Thank you, Wanda, with your country.
Oh, see you.
Version of my name. Okay. My name is Yolanda Taylor. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for being here today. We're going to start off with this grounding exercise. And let me ask you, or put a rhetorical question out there for most of you. Why do we ground? We ground to get ourselves fully present in this space today. So let's start. If you're sitting in your chair, please sit with your feet firmly planted on the ground or on the floor. Then sit up straight in your chair. Feet firmly planted, sitting up straight in your chair. Close your eyes or cast your gaze to a neutral, non-distracting place. With your eyes closed, I want you to breathe deeply. And what we're going to ground right now is the physical sensation of air coming in and out of our nose. air coming in and out of our nose. And we're gonna do that for 60 seconds. Ground in the physical sensation of the air coming out of your nose. And you're just concentrating on your breathing, which is natural. You're breathing deeply in and out. And if your mind wanders, don't judge that. Just gently bring your mind back to the physical sensation of you breathing deeply in and out of your nose. Okay, you can open your eyes for a moment. Grounding is important in social justice, racial justice, equity work, because this type of work happens now. We can't do the work in the past and we can't do it in the future. We have to do it now. So the next exercise I'm going to take you through will be a imagining and burden lifting exercise. Everyone, eyes open for this for right now. Now let me introduce you to the drummer, Mr. Eugene Taylor, my husband, and to the drum. The djembe drum, to be specific, the djembe originated in Ghana, Africa. It's a gathering drum. Its rhythm is part of nature. So I'm gonna ask you again to close your eyes. Imagine that you and everyone in this space are gathered around the drum in a tight-knit circle. We are bounded in mission. We are bounded in focus. And so we began to dance a dance of protest. We are protesting in dance against injustice. And the injustice, as our eyes are closed, is symbolized by a rock that's in the middle of our circle. We're in a circle, we're dancing in protest. We see the rock in the center of our circle, and it symbolizes injustice. The rock looks heavy, but we know that together we can lift it. We know we can lift the rock and we can break the rock into manageable pieces. So it's not so heavy anymore. So with your eyes closed, we continue to dance in a circle around this rock. But in our dance, we begin to move towards the center. And let's collectively prepare to lift that rock. So we lift the rock, we lift it high, raise our hands high. Collectively, we are lifting the rock. Lift it above our heads. And on a count of 1, 2, 3, we're going to shout and spread our hands apart in the air, therefore breaking the rock into manageable little pieces. 1, 2, 3. Woo! We break the rock into manageable little pieces. And now we dance in celebration. With a joyous noise, let love and mercy reign. Shout out grace and glory. Shout out all your day. Shout it when you're working. Shout it when it's hazy. Shout it when you're walking. Let them think you crazy. Oh, 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 oh. Now we are going to calm ourselves because our collective hard work in breaking the rock was successful. We know that we can be successful and that we are successful and that we will be successful today. You can open your eyes.
I'm ready.
Y'all ready?
Y'all, that was powerful. Let me tell you, I'm so ready. I had to go get my kente cloth. I felt my ancestors. They got my back. I'm ready. We're ready to do some stuff. So whatever makes you feel powerful, whatever, little thing you have in your home, whether you have some crystals or whether you have a drum, whatever makes you feel powerful in this moment, go get it, bring it with you. Hey, we are ready to build power collectively as a community, as a people. Hey, we got this. And now we're just going to move on because I'm feeling this. Hey, and to the next person, we have next Jamie Paulin. And Jamie is an attorney with Paulin Law Firm. And she is a movement and community law. It's a movement and community law firm, let me get that, which specializes in assisting tenants facing eviction and other housing justice issues. Jamie will speak on structural changes we can make related to the eviction and foreclosure process. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you so much to Yolanda and her husband for that wonderful grounding session. I'm Jamie Paulin. I'm here really to go through a few things about both the eviction and foreclosure process. I'll start off by saying that WRAL reported in August that about 50,000 North Carolina households were facing eviction. And at the same time in August, WRAL also reported that approximately it was a 27% increase in the number of foreclosures in North Carolina. And so we've certainly seen at the end of the CDC moratorium a great increase in both the number of households that are facing foreclosure and eviction. So it is a really serious problem that has certainly been exacerbated due to the end of the eviction moratorium. I'm not as familiar with the foreclosure process. I will say that in North Carolina, there are two different processes to foreclose against somebody. A foreclosure would happen when a person owns their residence, and it either occurs through what's called the power of sale, which is primarily an extrajudicial, or that means outside of the court process procedure, where the court approves and then basically there's a private sale by the trustee, or there can also be a judicial foreclosure. A power of sale foreclosure takes approximately 3 months if there are few challenges, and a judicial foreclosure can take even longer than that. Contrasting that with what's called the summary ejectment procedure in North Carolina, it was actually originally designed so that from the day that the tenant became late on their rent to the day that the sheriff would come and lock out the tenant could be done in less than a month. Some legal changes occurred, I think based on the COVID crisis, where part of that process was extended so that it does take slightly longer than that. But the idea behind the summary ejectment process was to make it as quick as possible for landlords to be able to force their tenant out. There are 4 bases for somebody to be evicted in North Carolina. It's failure to pay rent, breach of lease condition, holdover, which means you've stayed beyond the end of your lease, and finally, criminal activity. And our wonderful support IT folks have put up a graphic on the screen that shows basically what this process, the flow of this process from the beginning. So that would be the tenant missing rent. There's a 5-day grace period typically. So the landlord will either file on the 6th or the 11th day, depending on their own procedures. That's typically the case. A lease could potentially have a different day of the month where somebody's rent was due, but primarily for most people, it's due at the beginning of the month. Then according to procedural statutes, it used to be that once the landlord filed the eviction paperwork, that the jurisdiction had to set that trial within 7 days. Now it has been extended to 30. The sheriff then, once the papers are filed, the summons and complaint go to the sheriff's office, and all the sheriff has to do is tape those documents to the person's door, and that has begun the process of summoning that person to court. The summary ejectment process, the summary ejectment trial is held before a magistrate, and then if the magistrate finds in favor of the landlord, there is a 10-day appeal period. If the person doesn't appeal for whatever reason, the landlord may then go to the clerk of court and get a writ of possession issued, which is then sent to the sheriff, and that would cause the sheriff to lock out the tenant. Going back to the 10-day appeal period, if the tenant does appeal, that appeal goes to district court. And I would just say from my experience, successful appeals of a summary ejectment are fairly rare. We do know, I don't have statistics on it, but we know that both of these processes are disproportionately impacting people of color across the state. And part of our commitment as the statewide housing group is to not only advocate for tenants, but also particularly to lift up the experiences of people of color who have been disproportionately harmed by these processes. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Jamie. I was in a chat with someone while this was going on, and we both were like, this is triggering because we both have been through this process. But, you know, as I told her, you know, this makes me, it is triggering, but it also gives me the energy to go out and fight more for others. So if this is triggering for others, just take some time to breathe. And that's what this whole exercise that Yolanda and her husband did for us. So I can understand. So if you need to take some time to get some water, to just, you know, step away for a while, I totally understand, because you know, it brings back some memories when the sheriff is at your house, and, you know, but we're here for you as a support if you need someone to talk to or to chat with in the chat. Just, let it go in the chat. We're here if you want to conversate about how triggering or the impact of being evicted has had on your life. So I just, before we move forward, I just wanted to address that. And I know we have some people that joined us that have been impacted, and I don't want to just skirt over this and just move over this like this is business as usual. The work is real that we do, and I just want to acknowledge that. So thank you again, Jamie. Next, we're going to move into the insightful Jovita Lee. Jovita is the Senior Environmental Justice Campaigner for the Center for Biological Diversity. Jovita will speak on how the utility justice is an essential part of housing justice. Welcome, Jovita.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. And thank you for having me this evening. And so I'm going to speak a little bit about utility justice in North Carolina. It'll be a quick snapshot. Bree, if you want to go ahead and get started. Thank you. So as we know now, our energy system is completely failing. And so there's a couple reasons as to why, and I'm choosing 3 to highlight this evening. And so the first being that most North Carolinians live in an investor-owned utility or a monopoly. And so basically when we say that, we're thinking of Duke Energy or Dominion Energy. And I know that majority of us are Duke Energy customers. And so that means that those private corporations are the ones responsible for providing the energy, which means it eliminates choice as far as us being able to rely on another corporation to provide our energy. So they have monopolized the state, meaning they have put themselves in a position where avoiding Duke Energy is almost impossible. Secondly, cooperatives don't always cooperate. Now, there are other systems of utility here in the state, one of them being co-ops or cooperatives, and that's rural electric cooperatives. And this means that the provider in the area is collectively owned by the folks that live there. It sounds good in theory, but unfortunately, it does not always work in an equitable way. Sometimes co-op boards have folks that stay there entirely too long. They have meetings that restrict access to the notes. So if there's going to be a new policy, if there's going to be something coming up in regards to changing your electricity or your energy in your house, you're not going to know because they don't technically have to relay that information to you. And then third, disconnections and energy burden. We saw a lot of that over this COVID-19 pandemic. And so, of course, that's a huge burden on our community as far as being disconnected because you cannot have adequate housing if it does not have access to energy. And so, Bree, next slide. And so this is just a quick snapshot of a rate hike analysis. And that means this is based on Duke Energy's numbers. And this is basically their decision or their plan to increase your electricity bill. And so over the next 2 years, you can see about a $20 increase. Over the next 3 to 5 years, you'll see approximately a $40 increase. But by the time we get to year 6, you're going to see about a $100 increase in your utility bill. And this is going to directly impact low-income households because, as we know, there's a good percentage of Duke Energy customers that are considered low income. And so that energy burden increases to 10.5%. And so we're going to see a lot of households receiving bills that are going to be upwards of $300, $400, $500 and continue to go up simply because they have advocated that they need an increase in rates so they can pay their bills, even though they're $1 billion corporation. Next, please. And so I just wanted to show some images of the COVID-19 disconnections that happened over the pandemic. And so I just want to throw out some numbers so I can really ground in space what we witnessed over this pandemic. So in total, regards to Duke Energy, 182,000 households were disconnected over the pandemic. Duke Energy received $633 million in bailout money from the CARES Act, which should have been used to, actually recover folks for housing and for utility. But that could have covered the entire arrears for 32 times over. So we could have paid for everybody's disconnection, or Duke Energy could have paid for everybody's disconnection 32 times with that funding. And then Duke Energy also paid out $2.9 billion to their CEO for bonuses and dividends. And that could have paid for disconnections 151 times. And so the narrative that they created over the pandemic that they couldn't afford to assist or to help folks, or they had to disconnect you, was completely false. And Bree, the last slide. So these are just two beneficial policies that we will get into later that can speak to how we can kind of incorporate adequate energy and housing. And so with net metering, that's just a compensation method that's tied to solar energy. And then with community solar, that is an equitable solar energy process that we can start seeing in different rural and other communities across the state. And so we will get into the description of that later, but I just want to provide a snapshot of where we are with utility in North Carolina. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for that, Jovita. And you know what? I should have mentioned to you all when we first got started that you probably want to get out a pen and a pad, because there are going to be some information that you may want to notate, or you just want to type into and key into your computer. But this is some very insightful information as we organize, mobilize, and move forward. These discussions we're going to need to have with our community in order to build power in our community. So thank you for that, Jovita. And we're going to move on. Let's see, I'm working with two devices here, so sometimes I'm a little bit slower than I want to be, but I'm here. The next person is the wonderful Lamisha Whittington. She is the Deputy Director for Events Carolina and has extensive experience organizing around issues of environmental justice and disaster recovery. She will speak about how environmental justice and hazardous living conditions factor into the issue of housing justice. Welcome, LA to some, Lamisha to others. Hey, LA, hey, what's up?
Hey, Wanda. Hey, sis. Good to be here. And thanks for a very graceful and gracious introduction. I am also an Afro-Indigenous woman, a Black woman who unfortunately was evicted right before a pandemic, along with my family, my mother, my brother, and my at-risk grandmother. And this was due to gentrification in Raleigh. And being a woman who works full-time, I didn't expect to be living in a hotel with other incredible community members who were paying $1,400 a month on Capitol Boulevard for a one-room, two-bed area in a hotel. And so just thinking about the impact and what that actually means, I'm just grateful to be here and grateful for the leadership of Wanda, of Bree, of Yolanda, of April. I don't want to miss all the names, Jasmine, Jovita, all the folks you've seen here and folks you do not see, for creating and making sure the statewide housing network is represented for all of our people across the state who are facing disparate impact, because our communities have been in pandemic. I mentioned I was evicted before pandemic, right? So this is exacerbated. It didn't begin in pandemic. So a couple of stats that I'll run through really quickly: the tie between environmental justice and fair housing. I'm using that word because we know that that is a legal right passed by our Congress term. Here's a couple of things. Nearly 60%, it's 56% data, but nearly 60% of all people of color in this nation live only 2 miles away from a toxic waste site. That can be a landfill, that can be a dumping zone for corporations or their corporation activity. Only 2 miles, okay? As Wanda said, write this down. In urban areas produce 80% of greenhouse gas emissions in North America. This federal study said, and this was their term, I don't like this, the poor, and we're not the poor, folks that have been impoverished because of this economic system that is rigged, live in neighborhoods with the greatest exposure to climate and extreme weather events. So climate change has the most impact on our people, right? In addition, the disruptions to infrastructure during natural disasters, of course, can create impact, houselessness on top of rural communities, and urban communities most oftentimes live in energy inefficient homes. Grateful to Jovita for already talking about that utility impact. And to add to that, if you live in housing that is not energy efficient, isn't built with great insulation, great materials. That could be apartments, manufactured homes, trailers. Then your air or your heat is escaping because it doesn't have proper insulation, which means your utility bill increases. So you pay a cheaper light bill, a cheaper utility bill if you live in a $250,000 or a $500,000+ home versus someone who is already in impoverished conditions because they can't afford a home that can maintain that energy. That's environmental justice coupled with housing impacts. So really briefly, I want to share that data as we run through really clear. Environmental justice, there's a marriage, and I'm calling it the marriage of EJ plus fair housing. We have to do it when we're talking about tenants' rights and when we're talking about what is policy. Because right now, environmental justice is not clearly defined in fair housing. It should be, because fair housing should mean access to a healthy environment. Don't just put me in a home, put me in a home that won't kill me. Or create asthma or other illnesses that they say are our pre-existing medical conditions, but really it's the pre-existing condition of being put in a contaminated home that you called affordable but wasn't fair. So again, I'm with Advanced Carolina, North Carolina Black Alliance, okay? Environmental justice, the definition, is centered on the equitable implementation of environmental policies and ensuring that those policies don't have damaging effects on the people. That's EJ, the justice is the people. Even though there's no justice, it should be environmental injustice, but we'll work on that. We're getting to the justice. Fair housing is centered on dismantling housing practices that lead to segregated and underdeveloped communities. Okay, so fair housing is focused on practices that are blatantly segregation, discrimination. Environmental justice is the contaminated environment by which we live in, and it impacts us. Two different things that should be merged because they intentionally are collided on our people. Remember, we live only 2 miles away, most of us, right? It's because we are zoned, we are targeted, and we are used as dumping grounds, right? Hence Warren County, birth of the environmental justice movement in 1982, when they dumped contaminated soil in the backyard of their homes, right? Displacing and gentrifying through means of pollution, different level of gentrification, y'all. That's genocide. But it's using environmental contamination to do it. When the two collide, and this is a quote from, I believe, the Equity Justice Project, the bottom line is that an individual's or family's ability to choose which neighborhood to live in is critical. Well, what about when you can't choose, when you're gentrified? What about when you're zoned in an area that has already been previously contaminated and that's where you can afford to move, or that's where you were pushed because it's been zoned? We must also be committed to fighting to preserve and sustain neighborhoods in which people are already invested, because gentrification is genocide. It's just a repeat of history. Really quickly, the impact, reimagining housing and health. I make sure that this slide deck is incorporated so folks can look at these examples of different areas in different states that hurricanes, toxic waste plants, and even drainage to move flooding to low-income communities where strategic zoning, right, directions of housing and transportation commissions in order to beautify the city, in order to make that profit, because that capitalism over people, right? This is examples across the nation, including our own. Environmental justice is tied to housing justice because exploitation can be used with hurricanes to move us out the way. Hurricane Katrina, okay? This will be added. These are just some examples of impact in different states. Don't have time to go over it, but it will be added. Here's the policy, which is why I'm rushing through that to say this is some of what we need to talk about when we're reimagining, but this isn't the total sum. Don't have the answers. If we did, we would be in liberation, y'all. But this is what the consideration is. The Fair Housing Act, federally, recently upheld by the Supreme Court, is that it provides for disparate impact claims, not just cases based on discriminatory intent. That's powerful, because we can say that you have disparately impacted my land, my home has mold and mildew, I am impacted. And this right here that was upheld in the Fair Housing Act by the Supreme Court says it doesn't have to be, the intent doesn't have to be proven, just the impact. Well, honey, we got loads of impact because we are the impacted. We can use this to begin to challenge these horrible conditions of the affordable housing they're pushing us into, the lack of energy efficient homes they're pushing us into, or the landlords who won't renovate and redo the housing so we're not breathing in mold and mildew every single day, or lead piping or asbestos. This is part of it. This is one. The second policy, more locally, and then I'll end here, mold contamination recommendation. While there's no specific statute, which is ridiculous, this is the policy we got to change out, tenants' rights, regarding mold, toxic, or otherwise for renters. And guess what? Over 32% of all North Carolinians are renters. with the highest population being communities living with disabilities. So this is very key. North Carolina's implied warranty of habitability statute and the Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices Act. Really long, really important, because that's what you need to Google when looking at this language, that guess what? It could provide some protection for renters. Landlords are required to maintain habitable premises, okay? They have to based on the statute. So if it's not clean for you to live in, you could potentially challenge using this statute. So we have to be very clear what we can use, what we need to be creative with attorneys like Yolanda and others to be how we're creative with the law and following their lead, but we need to know how we can ebb and flow to challenge that fair housing is environmental justice, period. If you have questions, please email me, here to support. Love y'all deeply. Thanks for having me.
Woo! Woohoo! To keep this energy going, we're gonna move into Kenya Myers. Kenya Myers is a voting rights advocate with disability rights, North Carolina, and the adjunct instructor at the Patricia Robert Harris National Fair Housing Training Academy. She has vast experience in identifying abusive lending and housing practices. She will speak on the intersection of disability and housing justice. Come on through, Miss Kenya Myers.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I only have a few minutes, but I do want to use my space to talk about a program that Disability Rights is sponsoring specifically to assist people who are housing insecure or utility insecure at the moment. We have been, for the past 3 weeks now, hosting live intake clinics to assist people apply and expedite any application that they may have pending with the NC Hope program. This NC Hope program is a program out of the state that covers 88 counties. It received the abundance of the CARES Act money to assist with eviction protection, eviction diversion, and utility prevention. And so we have set up a process with them, we Disability Rights, by which anyone that comes to our clinic, if they have a pending application, we will put you in our pipeline where we have direct access to the people who are reviewing and approving those applications. If you have not made application, we have law students that are helping us at each of these clinics to help you complete an application. And then that application gets in our pipeline and it's expedited. We've had 4 clinics thus far on, we just began on September 9th, 10th, and then 17th, and then last Friday, the 24th. And I'm happy to report, as I did in our staff meeting this morning, that every person that has come through our clinic has been approved and funded. And there were 3 people that participated in our clinic on the 17th, and they were approved and funded on the 23rd. So we have our process down to about a 4-day approval rate period at this moment. I'm hoping to get it down to 2 to 3 days. But our flyer, which is up on the screen now, and Bree and Jasmine have it, and you can put it in the chat and you can circulate it. An appointment is not needed. People can register and come on. They can't register, they can just pop up. If they don't have internet, they can just call. And what we'll do is we'll get their information and we will have a law student call them during the times of our clinic. And if they can't get to us, they're not available, then we'll assign someone to follow up with them when they are available. LA dropped the statistic, and I'm so glad that she did, that 32% of people in North Carolina are renters, and the vast majority are people with disabilities. So we see and understand the intersectionality, which is why we stepped into this space. Me as the voting rights advocate who has 15 years of experience in housing and legal aid before my career here, my position was we have to, at Disability Rights, step in this space. And how are we going to make a difference? What side of history do we want to be on? And do we want to contribute to the solution? And so that's why we're doing this. And please circulate widely. October 1st is not the last one. We're preparing a new flyer now, and we're even looking at going an all-day statewide live event before the end of October. So that information will be coming soon. I will share it with Bree, Jasmine, and others so that everyone here can get that information. But we are doing all we can to partner people with this money, with these benefits. We want to get money in the hands of landlords so that we can stop evictions. That is the bottom line. We want to get money to the utility companies so that we can stop people from losing their power. And I understand working in legal services for more than 15 years, all of the legal arguments that are surrounding this, but at the end of the day, if a landlord doesn't want to take the money, then they don't have to. So the best thing that we can do is to get them the money, and for those who want it, to get it to them and get it to them time. The other thing that I just want to say in my last few minutes, and if there are any questions, please put them in the chat and I'll be happy to address them, is that, which I'm sure everyone here does know, but I always use an opportunity to say it out loud, that any house that transitions during this pandemic, from this point forward, within the last 6 months, any house that transitions, whether it be from an eviction, from a foreclosure, or from the owner selling it in North Carolina, it will not reemerge as affordable or accessible. So the already limited, insufficient affordable housing stock will be depleted further. It is imperative that all of us in all of our spaces, with all of the tools that we have available and know-how, skill sets to us, that we hold the line and we help people hold on to their homes, to stay in the housing that they're in. Because if they lose it, there will not be, there is not sufficient building. If every apartment and every house that was being built in North Carolina right now was made into affordable housing, it will still be insufficient. It would be insufficient. So it is imperative that all of us in this space and all other spaces, that we use all of the tools, knowledge, skill sets that we have to help people hold on to their house. Thank you so much.
Y'all, let me tell you something. I want everyone to pay attention right now, please. Those of us who have been on the ground and doing this work since they told us to stay at home, and even though people didn't have a home and have seen this eviction process and seen people be put out on the streets, those of us who have been working with these organizations, these nonprofit organizations, these government organizations, and seeing them fail our community every day. And then we see finally, I'm just going to say it, a superhero like Sister Kenya Myers come through in the last minute, in the last midnight hour, and hold up and uphold our community. I want to give her some applause. And y'all, I want you all to applaud her, because if you all have seen and been on the ground and working with some of these nonprofits and some of these governmental organizations that we pay our tax money to, and some of these that we have had to deal with, you might want to run around your house right now. Some of them we have had to hold ourselves back from having a street brawl, to be true. Tell the truth now. So I'm going to give Kenya her props, because she didn't have to. She did it because it was in her heart, not because it was in her job description. All right. So thank you, Kenya. And just like she said, we have to hold up. We have to be the ones who hold the line on this saving the naturally occurring affordable housing, something we've been fighting for in the Wake County Housing Justice Coalition. Shout out to my brothers and sisters in Wake County. But we're going to move forward, because I can start preaching, and they have not paid me an offering, so I'm not going to go any further. on that until I get an offering. But anyway, next we have two fabulous organizers on the ground, every day, on the ground, coming from the 704 Charlotte, North Carolina. April Lewis and Jessica Moreno. You can't introduce one without introducing both. They come together, you get one, you get the other. There are organizers with Action NC, Tenant Organizing Resource Center. They, because you get 2 for 1, work with tenants statewide to form tenant associations and address unsafe living conditions. They will speak about the needs of people living in hotels and mobile home parks and the marginalized populations that experience the greatest amount of difficulty securing housing because of what? Discrimination. Come on, 704, come through, Charlotte. What's up, y'all?
What's up?
Wanted to get you hype, boy. I'm telling you what his intro was like. Dang, I feel like a superhero. Dang. Oh.
Why it introduces you? Ooh. Thank you so much, Ms. Wanda.
Ground myself. Jessica, give me a second. I need to ground myself from that one. Ooh. Ooh. Okay, so yes, definitely. First and foremost, thank you to everybody that's on this call. Like, we all simultaneously put in blood, sweat, and tears behind this movement. And like Wanda says, me and Jessica go out here in our community in Mecklenburg County and basically talk door knocking. I just came from door knocking. We got to get the people involved. And definitely what we're going to talk about are the most impacted and vulnerable group of individuals, those living in hotels, and definitely those that live in mobile home parks. I'll let Jess take up the space for mobile home parks and her experience, and then I'll take up the ladder.
Thank you, April. I'm going to share my screen to the campaign that actually brought me into this work. My name is Jessica Maria. I'm a housing justice organizer at Action North Carolina, and I work a project called Tenant Organizing Resource Center, TORC. This campaign that we see here is called Save Oak Haven. Oak Haven was a mobile home park in Matthews, North Carolina, that actually went against a multi-billion-dollar development company. The neighborhood was being rezoned. It was about 24 homes. The reason that most people choose mobile home parks to live in is due to the affordability. And even before the affordability, there's a lot of barriers to get housing in a home or an apartment complex that would make it easier for someone in that position with bad credit or no credit, legal status, among other barriers that we all know exist in our communities. So we choose mobile home parks for the affordable housing part. And when we go into these communities, we see that a lot of the times there are rent-to-own scams that people deal with, where they buy their mobile home park and rent the land, buying the home for thousands of dollars just to be able to rent the land at an affordable price for them. Sometimes some communities don't even get the title to their homes or have to pay extra water or extra light. And so people deal with similar situations in apartment complexes or single family homes as far as predatory practices from the real estate industry. One of the problems with mobile home parks is for situations where people own their homes but rent the lot. And if one day the owners decide to sell the property, then people are stuck in a situation where they have to figure out not only where to go, but where they can move their home that they've invested in. That was a situation at Oak Haven in Matthews. All of the tenants there actually own their homes and rented the land. So when we figured out that there was gonna be a rezoning, 350 high-end apartments built, we started organizing. We started going to the town halls, to the zoning meetings, and speaking up against that. Now, mind you, this community was mainly undocumented, mainly Latinx and seniors, white seniors and Latinx community. And so think of the most vulnerable people, immigrants, that usually if it hadn't been for Action and Seat organizing, we wouldn't have had a leg to stand on. We had to figure out where to move these homes. In Mecklenburg County, there's nowhere that you can move a mobile home. There's no space. Parks are being closed left and right because high rises are being built instead. It's more money in high rises than in mobile home parks. And so really the protection that we have in all affordable housing is to organize, is to come together. We were a small community, but we came together. And we weren't not able to keep our community. However, we were able to get enough time, a year, to stay in place. And we got $8,000 given to each family to help move. Now, did that cover the moving expenses? No. However, fighting helps, because if not, we would not have gotten even that. There are thousands of communities across North Carolina that are dealing with gentrification issues. And if we don't organize, we do not win anything. So what we need and what would be helpful, one of the things that our community, Oak Haven tenants, wanted to do was to buy land. Why can't we buy it? Let's buy our community to be safe. The problem with us was that it was too late. The timing was against us. We were against a rock and a hard place. So a defense that we can do is to organize before it happens in mobile home parks, cooperatives, where we can purchase our community and live in it instead of being tenants in our community. And so I know April is going to touch on that, but those are that would be ideal. A statewide right to first refusal will also be beneficial, because if the owners decide to sell, then we have first dibs on purchasing it as a community and cooperative. So these are the type of things that tenants at mobile home parks deal with, and I will pass it off to April.
Thanks, Jessica. So I'm going to talk about those individuals that are also directly impacted, and it's a lot more residents in motels, actually, and hotels, those extended stays. And there's a variety of reasons why individuals end up living in a hotel. It's the most convenient. You don't have to do a background check, application fees. You pay the fee and you can stay. As long as you pay, you have a place to lay your head. However, those fees can range upwards to $400 a week. That right there enough is you buying a home. However, you're in that spiraling trap of you can't save money. You can barely cover your food expenses. You definitely really don't have much hope of actually coming out of that situation. And I definitely saw in the chat those motel communities that definitely are experiencing this. So part of the issues are discrimination, like housing discrimination. Can you believe that a majority of those individuals are waiting to have some type of home because of housing choice voucher or Section 8 voucher that they have, that they can't find anyone to actually accept it, which is a source for income discrimination. That's guaranteed funds that is coming to a landlord, but because of a stigma, then they're not accepting it. But again, this is guaranteed funding that's coming from the government. Also, most individuals that are forced to live in hotels, they may have an eviction on their record. So when we're thinking about what we need, we need a life that once I've done my time basically with eviction, that goes away. I can have another chance. But in our current state, we know you get evicted, that stays on your record and nobody is going to rent to you. And then we go into that spiral of the only place you can go, a motel or a room shared living situation if you are lucky. Another thing is why we tie into having these tenant co-ops, because those individuals that have evictions and criminal records, they're the ones that are most impacted and unable to secure habitable housing. They let up and find a private owner that might treat them horribly, but they're going to allow themselves to deal with terrible maintenance, horrible staff, just horrible treatment, because they're not going to be able to rent anywhere else. So those are things that we really need to have to change the dynamic around in tenant co-ops and social housing. is an option that we definitely really need to take a serious look at, because we have to apply some type of pressure and some way of pushing back as far as with these landlords and what they're actually charging, application fees, etc. I dropped in the link. There's 2 links about social housing, an example of social housing in Vienna, Italy that's successful. And I have been able to speak with probably about 2 or 3 individuals that have some knowledge around tenant co-ops, and one that actually lives in a tenant co-op. So let's just think about those ways of reinventing housing and making it work for us. And I'll go ahead and let us go on with our think session, but thank you so much for everybody joining up.
I'll just mention one more thing, sorry, before we pass it off. In North Carolina, in Asheville, in Wingate, in other areas, we have communities that have formed cooperatives and have purchased their communities and are living in communities that they own altogether. So we have the possibility to do that. We just need the will to do it. And as long as you want to do it, you can do it. So it's out there, it's close to home, and we can continue doing that to protect our communities.
Definitely. Thanks, everyone.
See, that's what I'm talking about, ownership. And the way we take ownership is using our voices, using our power. And one of the ways we're going to do that today is by participating in this process. Now, many of us have spoken now, but at this point, this is an opportunity for those who have joined us today to participate, meaning that you'll have an opportunity to raise your hand, say stack, and participate in the process. So if you're not awake, hey, I know you may have work today, but we're going to continue to find some energy, find a little coffee, or find a little something, little music. You want me to beat on the drums? Hey, and we're going to wake up, because this is about not only about us, but it's about our community and it's about the people. And so we're going to fight the powers that be. So we're going to find that energy to do so. So now I'm getting ready to explain the process of reviewing the registration survey that we did, the proposed demands. Let me check my messages. Like I said, I am working with 2 different devices right here, and I want to make sure. Oh, okay. Before we move on, I'm going to pass it to Bree, because Bree is going to explain the registration process, the registration survey that you all received. You know, when you registered, there was a survey. I mean, there were some questions. So she's going to explain that process to you better than I can.
You know, I'm sure I couldn't do it better than Ms. Wanda could, but I do have it in front of me, and I just wanted to acknowledge. So Ms. Wanda is about to read the list that we have in the, the packet that went out, and that was compiled from conversations that we have been having as a statewide network, some things that people sent in from across the state already. And then we also had responses that people sent in when they registered for this event. So I just wanted to read some of those out loud. And just, again, thank everybody. Like, it's not easy to take 5 to 8 p.m. on a Wednesday night to join something like this. So I really we all appreciate folks joining in a call like this. We have people from all across the state, and I think it's just a snapshot of what is possible if we continue to build together. But let me just read through some of what people said. Rent control, required affordable housing, less hoops for Section 8 people to jump through. Someone else said housing as a human right, protection of heirs' property, limits on second homes, stop bills that are actually hurting our communities, inclusion of environmental justice in the definition of fair housing, resource support for regular remediation of toxic housing, options besides eviction, no voucher discrimination, disclosure of past property damage, past tenant complaints, past landlord habitable code violations. Someone said we need to make it easier to build missing middle housing. Someone else said, I would like to see rent increases addressed, define the practice of redlining, statewide right to require developers to include affordable housing in each development, right to counsel, housing is a human right, affordable rent, establish a permanent, truly affordable housing fund, rent control, affordability at every income level, rent control again, mandated utility cost restrictions, mandated land reparations, expansion of multifamily zoning, support for cooperative ownership of housing, moratorium on evictions, right to counsel, rent control, policies for reentry into housing for those formerly incarcerated, and increase publicly owned housing in desirable areas. So there's a lot coming to the forefront. I think in a lot of ways we're on the same page, but I'll pass it to Ms. Wanda, and I guess we can read through the list that we have right now and then open it if people have other suggestions that are not on that list, and then let's discuss it.
Thank you for that, Bree. Like I said, I am working from 2 lists right here, but the process is we're gonna review the proposed demands, and we're gonna take a poll. We're gonna discuss the results and then vote. And then once we vote, we're gonna read through the list, the top list of demands that would come through, so that we all voted on. So if you all are ready, we're gonna put the poll up, right, Greg?
And I can share.
I'm actually gonna share I got the links. So Bree, want me to just I can put both links in want me to put both links in the chat?
Sure, yeah, one is in Spanish and one is in English, right?
Yeah, one is in Spanish, one is in English, and I am putting them in the chat right now.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I guess would it help if I read through the list here in English? I'll read it in English, and Mercado or Felipe will translate. So this is the list that we have. I'll read through it, and then if folks have questions about any of these, feel free to type it in the Q&A or raise your hand. We want to make sure that we're all understanding. So number 1, right of tenants to withhold rent because of poor conditions. Number 2, require good cause for evictions. 3, provide for a right to a lawyer for eviction cases. 4, create an eviction diversion program. 5, outlaw discrimination based on source of income, sexual orientation, disability, race, ethnicity, age, citizenship status. Number 6, increase funding for state fair housing enforcement. North Carolina Human Relations Commissions at Office of Administrative Hearings. Number 7, regulation of tenant screening, including limits on using eviction filings, criminal record, and credit scores, more transparency in the screening process. Number 8, dedicated source of state funding for affordable housing. For example, increasing the documentary stamp tax and dedicating it to the North Carolina Housing Trust Fund and a new tenant-based rental assistance program. Number 9, make it clear that local governments can adopt inclusionary zoning. Number 10, protections for manufactured homeowners who rent their lot by requiring a right of first refusal for residents of a park being sold, along with incentives for selling to the residents. Number 11, ban on application fees. Number 12, require written leases. Number 13, eviction expungement. 14, omit financial penalties for domestic violence survivors who must break the lease agreement to seek safety from their abuser. Provide coverage for all forms of abuse, whether that's sexual, verbal, financial, physical, and any other form of abuse that is classified by the state of North Carolina. Number 15, defer any inquiry into criminal convictions of applicants and their household members until after the applicant is qualified. Number 16, allow the applicant to provide evidence of reporting errors, rehabilitation, and or other mitigating factors related to convictions that would show they are a good candidate despite their record. Number 17, require landlords to post and or list in writing a description of the application and approval policy and the process regarding second chance tenants. Number 18, rights to counsel for all tenants facing eviction. Number 19, rent control. Number 20, right of first refusal for apartment buildings when dealing with tenant associations or tenant unions that want to buy. And number 21, right to tenant organizing, meaning retaliatory evictions during a tenant organizing should be made illegal if you can prove it. So Greg has posted both of the polls. There's one in English and one in Spanish. And again, just to be clear, we're not saying like anything is off the table. This is just to get a sense of if you chose 10 out of this as like what you think are the most urgent things that should be at the forefront, that should be featured in the zine. If you'll select those, and then we're going to take a look at what those results look like and talk about it and discuss it. So we'll give, maybe 5 minutes? Do y'all think that's enough time for folks to kind of look it over? And again, if you have questions, feel free to either raise your hand or post it in the Q&A, and Greg can unmute you so you can speak if you have any questions or comments. If there's anything that you think has not been discussed or listed here, and you think it's a really important thing to consider, please feel free to put that in the chat, the Q&A, or raise your hand and talk about it. This is, like we said, it's an ongoing process of discussion and building. It's not about taking anything off the table. It's just about strategizing around what we put at the forefront of the conversation. I'm going to click on the poll so folks can see that too. And again, this list that I was just reading from, it's in that packet that was emailed out and has also been posted in the chat. And I'm going to share here on the screen what the poll looks like if you go to it. So here's a list of all of the things that we just read through. And there's also another suggestion if you want to write something down here that you did not see listed. That's another place you could list it, and you can just go through and select your top 10 choices. And then at 6:30, we'll take a look. Let's see, Devin says number 3 and number 19 seem redundant as far as right to counsel. Number 3 says provide a right for a lawyer for eviction cases. And number 19 is rent control. I'm sorry, he probably means number 18, rights to counsel. Yeah, I would agree. That's kind of redundant. You know, that is kind of like the same, saying basically the same thing. This list was compiled from submissions that people made from across the state. So, you know, if we don't want to split the difference, like if we want to make sure, I would say just select number 3, because I agree with Devin, number 3 and number 18 are pretty much saying the same thing. So if right to counsel is one of your top 10, I would say select number 3 so we make sure it gets the proper weight when we read the pullout. Yeah, that's fine. I see it's number 3 and number 18 are the same. So I would say if you think right to counsel should be in the top 10, go with number 3. And then that way we get a proper weight and we're not splitting the vote. And Jessica says, also retaliatory eviction is illegal already, right? Jamie, are you able to answer that question for us? I think it's supposed to be illegal, but I think maybe the question is that right now there's not a lot of protection against it.
Right.
She is correct that it is illegal. It's already within the North Carolina statutes that that tenants cannot be discriminated against for organizing. But I think that's exactly right. The way that manifests itself would be that a tenant is organizing, gets evicted, or, you know, has to go through the process and raise it as an affirmative defense. And, you know, there's a burden to prove all of that, you know, that was the reason that the tenant was evicted and not other reasons. And so how strong that protection is certainly within question.
Thank you for that, Jamie. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, please feel free to jump in. There is absolutely no bad question. There's no, I mean, except if you want to hop in and say you don't think housing is a human right, that's kind of like the floor here. But, you know, any comments, questions, thoughts, please feel free to either type in the chat, use the Q&A, or raise your hand. Thomas McKinney asked, can we explain what the North Carolina Housing Trust Fund is and who manages it? Yolanda Taylor said the North Carolina Housing Coalition is the administrator. Does anybody have any more detail on how that is administered? Because I'm more familiar with like the local housing trust fund. Are you able to explain more, Yolanda? And Jamie posted some explanation in the chat here about retaliation. Thank you. Okay, so we're at 6:30. Is there anybody who needs more time?
Oh, I'm sorry, Bree.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm trying to get off mute.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I just got off camera instead. I was like, oh, I'm still on mute. You say you wanted more information about the North Carolina Housing Trust Fund?
Yes, if you could.
Yeah, the statewide one, it was created by, you know, our state General Assembly. They're the ones that allocate funding in it. That funding, my understanding, the last time I researched it, has not increased. And the proposed budget, you know, that's in the General Assembly, there's not a proposal to increase that amount. I think it's the same since the last 4 years, but the funds, you know, are supposed to help leverage a variety of housing solutions. And my understanding is that the North Carolina Housing Coalition administers that fund, and they advocate and they, you know, lobby for, you know, the fund to be, I guess, increased. So that's just my basic knowledge, is that it's administered through the North Carolina Housing Trust Fund. I think they do a variety of things. If you guys know the mission of that coalition, they do the low-income housing tax credit programs. They do some home ownership programs. I think the way it's administered is through the programs that the coalition does. And I'll drop the link in the chat.
Okay, so did everybody get a chance? I didn't see anybody say that they needed
more time.
More time. So I think, are we able to get a readout of the results, Greg?
Yep, coming right up. Let me see. Let me see how I can share these. So give me 1 second. And what I can do, I can just share my screen. And all right, I'll start off with this one. And let me get the results real quick. All right. Close out some tabs. Let me see if I can actually copy the chart and get them in actually, I might have to just read about it. So here this is for the English version. And I would say, if I had a little bit more time, I can put it in a slightly different format. But there is, of course, we have the leading one at 13 is rights of tenants to withhold rent because of poor conditions. Then, so Bree, real quick, do you want me to go down the top 10 as far as selections, or you want to just share the results?
Well, we can all see the results. Like if you'll read out the top ones for us, that'd be cool.
Perfect. So the top, I would say, like, let's just go through the top 10. First one being rights of tenants to withhold rent because of poor conditions, proposed ideas. And this is all proposed ideas to consider. So that's the number one. Then it looks like eviction expungement. So let me hover over. Yeah, eviction expungement on the records as far as if you've been evicted before, being expunged. Then we have rent control.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have right to tenant organizing. So that's probably around 4, and some of them are the same thing. So then we go to provide for a right to a lawyer for eviction cases. So that's on 5. Then we'll go to regulation of tenant screening, including limits on using eviction filings, criminal record, and credit scores. So then we go to 7, ban on application fees. The next one, omit financial penalties for domestic violence survivors who must break the lease from an abuser. Then we have create an eviction diversion program. I think that's around 9.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a ties at 10. Allow the applicant to provide evidence of reporting errors, etc. And then require good cause for evictions. So those are around the top 10 or 11. You want me to read any further? Or I think that's the kind of drift for this one.
No, I think that's good. Is it possible to post those results in the chat so folks can other people access it?
Yep.
You go to the Spanish language. Is that possible?
Yep. Let me go to let me stop sharing for a second. And what I'll do is once I put the other one up, I will do a screenshot of it. So give me 1 second.
Hua pointed out that inclusionary zoning is also tied at 8 votes. Yeah.
Okay, so for the Spanish version, we didn't get any responses on the Spanish version.
Okay.
But I guess in the follow-up email, we can also send those as well. I mean, send the link.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. Tammy asked, what is inclusionary zoning? Would anybody like to explain that? I mean, I could give my best layperson's explanation, but I don't know if there are people on here who might have one of our attorneys might be better able to explain it.
Hey, it's Yolanda again. Inclusionary zoning, is a sought after tool by cities, municipalities. It's like, let's say a developer wants to build housing, multifamily housing in your community, then the city, if inclusionary zoning was not as legally complicated as it is in North Carolina, a city could require that a developer set aside a percentage of all units as affordable. Like, for example, inclusionary zoning will mean that the developer, in order to, get the approval of the city council to build the multi-family housing, will have to set aside, let's say 25% of the units as affordable. So that's what inclusionary zoning is. There's mandatory inclusionary zoning and there's voluntary inclusionary zoning. In North Carolina, the mandatory inclusionary zoning is what most cities and some attorneys consider to be legally problematic, because cities and municipalities have to have enabling legislation in order to do certain things. And so the argument is that if the legislation has not been created that will allow a city to use I say mandatory inclusionary zoning, then that it's illegal. And a lot of people feel that it's illegal. It's kind of murky because we also have a state Fair Housing Act. We have the federal Fair Housing Act, but we also have the state Fair Housing Act, which mirrors the federal Fair Housing Act, but the state Fair Housing Act as another discrimination element, which is that you cannot discriminate against the building of affordable housing. So the fact that on one hand, you have a state Fair Housing Act that protects the building of affordable housing, but the zoning tools and the legislation that lists the various zoning tools that a city can use does not have a element of price point. So that's why people are saying, well, you know, they don't have a zoning tool where they can determine what a developer builds or what the price point of housing should be. So like I said, it's very murky, but that's basically what it is, a requirement to set aside a certain number of housing as affordable. That was a long explanation, but sorry.
No, that was perfect. Thank you so much for that explanation. Tammy says thank you. So I'm typing up the results right now just to put the list out, but I wanted to open it up to discussion if folks had any thoughts, questions, reactions. And, you know, at the very top, I gave kind of like a quick overview of where we're talking about going with this. If people had any comments, thoughts, or reactions or feedback on that, because again, like none of this is, you know, our goal is to strengthen our network connections across the state so that we can all really mobilize together. And even though we have kind of like a set group of people that have been meeting twice a week for a few months now, you know, we're not the be all and end all of this conversation, obviously. And so, you know, we would love to have more thoughts and input and reactions to what we are proposing. You know, how is this sounding to people? Does this sound like it is on track with what you all are thinking and feeling and seeing as well? Please feel free to type in the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to speak, and Greg can unmute you.
And I think Thomas has his hand up real quick. And Thomas, you can unmute yourself, brother. Perfect.
Yeah, you know, I've been in North Carolina now for about 6 years in Greenville, Eastern North Carolina, and have migrated or was gentrified out of Brooklyn, New York. You know, where the gentrification is rapid, right? And so, but we didn't realize that how it is progressing significantly in the South. So that tells me that it's happening nationally everywhere. And I think it's you know, like I put in the chat, a capitalistic tool, right? To, you know, like once a certain area becomes desirable, or by the developers that wasn't once desirable, where people were placed, and then that layer becomes desirable, then they figure out a way to justify that and recolonize people to other areas, right? And I see this happening, you know, everywhere. And so I think the efforts of these platforms are, you know, it's not just something that we can take haphazardly. I think this is essential. It's something that, you know, it's survival related. You know, we have to do this in order to you know, facilitate the needs and the basic rights of those of us who are not economically empowered in the ways that others are. So I mean, this is a powerful session for me. And you know, I'm learning. I'm getting, you know, just getting involved and, you know, finding out how the trajectory is going, the lay of the land, and I'm willing to participate in any way I can. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Thomas. Of those top 10 demands, and you're speaking of gentrification, which ones touch you the most from your experience that you think should be at the top?
Are you directing that to me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Yes, I think that the legal representation, the fact about the application fees, the management companies getting involved and determining who and why people can rent or not rent. The 3 times, what is that? 3 times your income's got to be 3 times your the rent. But people are making minimum wage. So yeah, these are some of the issues that are predominant in my estimation.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes. Is there anyone else that would like to speak from their experience, personal experience, or from their work on the top 10, the top 10 demands that they think should be listed? I see in the chat where Devin said, I see most of the options as defensive, with some things like first right of refusal as proactive. The probably accurate reflects the work we are doing, where we are at. But I'd love to see a conscious effort to address the situation on multiple levels: defensive, anti-eviction, proactive, ability to buy as a tenant union or trailer park community, rent control, to long-term changes, which are truly transformative, such as ending profit making from housing. I hear you, Devin. Would you like to come off mute and speak on those things?
And hi, Wanda. I would say, even with that, I think Tamila, hopefully I said your name, where Tamila Wiggins has their hand up to speak as well.
Oh, I didn't see any hands because the way this thing, what my iPad.
No way. That's why I got you, Wanda. That's why I got you.
I thank you for having my back. Well, before Devin, of course, ladies first. So we're going to go to Tamila. Yes, Ms. Tamila.
Okay, how you doing, everybody? My name is Tamila Wiggins. Pronouns is she and her, and I'm also a grassroots organizer. I think the domestic violence, like reinforcing the protections of victims of domestic violence, and when we have to break our leases, that is not so hard for us to get back into housing. I experienced that being having to live in a 2-bedroom with three families in one house when I had to break my lease due to domestic violence. And that domestic violence was reflected when I went to other apartments. And I had to give them the disposition. I had to, if that person were to come back to the property, which I had kids with, they kind of use that as a reason for me not to be able to stay on their property. I think that should be in the top 10 because that's how a lot of women with children get displaced, or we end up staying with other family members, and that causes stress on the parent and the child. But only, I say 5 months ago, we have been able to move into our own, our own place. And this happened 2 years ago. So that should.
I am so sorry you had to experience that, my sister, and I'm grateful to know that you all are moving forward. And it's unfortunate that with all the money that is going through the hands of the government, it took 2 years. So, but I could see why you most definitely feel like that should be at the top 10. Is there anyone else with their hand up, Greg, before I move forward?
So not right now. Not right now. I don't see any other hands as of right now.
Okay. So Devin, I was going to give you an opportunity to speak before I move on to someone else about the top 10.
So Devin, you should be able to speak now.
Yeah, I'm here. I don't need to take up too much space if there's other people, but I'm just saying, it's kind of a hodgepodge. It's difficult to rank apples versus oranges. So I see sort of a stratification of ideas, and a lot of the defensive stuff has to be done. But there's also a good idea to set sort of our vision, and if we can really do some long-term visioning together, we can use our vision as criteria for judging the incremental steps we take. And we want to make sure if we're doing something, we don't create new entire state structures built around supporting profit, housing for profit, if that's not our long-term goal. Do you see what I'm saying? This is like something that Miriam Kaba talks about in evaluating police reform. We want to think about what are the new things that we're creating and how do they relate to our long-term vision.
Okay, thank you for that. I saw your responses in the chat, and I just want to give you an opportunity to voice some of those things just in case people miss those. And so I see a lot of action in the chat, but there are some, I'm going to mention that call out, and some I may not. So, but if you feel like you want to say something and I don't call your name, please raise your hand.
And Wanda, Greg, real quick. Yep, I'm just wanted to let you know, as the co-pilot right here. I believe Yolanda has her hand up, and Wanda Hunter. Wanda Hunter as well.
Yes.
So,
okay.
feel free to
I'm gonna let Wanda Hunter go, and then Yolanda. Wanda Hunter, please, since we haven't heard from you today.
Okay, I just wanted to highlight one thing I hadn't heard in the conversation, and that is when these developments are bought by new owners, the old owners always send out a letter or put a letter on the tenant's door and say, we have to be out by XYZ day. And I think that is just a shortcut for developers to not have to go through the summary ejectment process and not have to pay the fines that it costs for them to actually legally evict people. And I think that those developers should be held accountable. If they want those people to move and they want them to move in a short notice, that they should be required to go through the summary ejection process. And if they try to cut corners, they should be fined as such. Too many times in the criminal justice or civil justice system, poor people always have to foot the bill, because I don't care what civil penalty law, whatever you may break. If you're poor, you're gonna pay the fine. You're gonna pay whatever that cost is. And too many times, poor people always have to foot the bill. It's time for them to start putting their knee on the necks of the developers and these rich folk that keep trying to oppress poor people and exploit us for the little bit of money that we do have. So when people are continuing to do that, if you want to buy a development and you want people to be out, you should have to go through the summary ejectment process, pay for how many ever people it is to stay in that development, and pay those fines to the courthouse to have those people go through that process. There's no way that you should be able to cut corners and just put a notice on somebody's door and scare the hell out of people, because people don't understand that it's an illegal eviction until it goes through the summary ejectment process. And I think that is something that needs to be handled accordingly.
Yes, my sister, I most definitely agree with that. And any of you who I don't even know what that's called, if that was on the choices for us to choose on the poll, but whatever that's called, if you all agree with that, put it in the chat so we make sure that gets in the top 10, because that is most definitely something we experience a lot here in the Wake County area. I'm sure it's something statewide, and it's probably national as well. I'm not sure how other states handle it, but I know here in Wake County it's a major problem. So we're going to move on to Attorney Yolanda. Yes, Yolanda Taylor.
Hey, Sister Taylor, you're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. I'm always on mute. What in the world? Thank you, Wanda. I was just going to say that I was going to piggyback off of what Wanda Hunter has said. That was some of my thoughts, but I raised my hand because you had asked Thomas which one of these 10 things, now 11 things, would stop gentrification. And I was going to say that at the end of the day, like Wanda say, if someone owns the property, they can sell it to a new landlord. And at the end of the day, even if you have a lease agreement and you have rent control, you have right to counsel, you have all these other things, a landlord can sometimes terminate the lease agreement if, if your lease term has expired. So I don't know if there should be a rallying cry for longer lease terms, because that's a way too how we've seen during the pandemic how landlords have tried to get around the whole eviction moratorium, if you recall, which was to say that someone was an over tenant and that their lease agreement had expired. So so I do like some of the other things that have been elevated, the co-ops being able to own land, have these tenant unions be able to buy land. I think Devin raised that. And then what Wanda just talked about, I don't know how we can name that other than making the sale of property to a new landowner an act of eviction. And by making that an act of eviction, then that will then be subjected to the North Carolina Chapter 42, which is a landlord-tenant law that requires this eviction process that Wanda spoke about. Because it is an eviction.
It is. It is. Definitely is. Definitely.
That's it.
Thank you all for that. Let's see. Is there anyone else with their hand up? Co-pilot.
Yep. Bree Newsom Bass back in the mic.
Yes, Bree.
Y'all are funny. Yeah, no, I raised my hand because I wanted to respond to a question that Hua raised, which was, let me scroll back. Is it possible to include some kind of accountability measure in the Housing Bill of Rights? Yes, absolutely. And like, I think what's coming up for me in this conversation is maybe it makes sense to think about our approach as categories. Like, and that's part of why I was typing it out this way, because I think we are identifying like specific things that are definitely top of mind for us, but we're also identifying categories, which could also be helpful. You know what I mean? Kind of like broader categories, like, so we could name, you know, defensive anti-eviction, the proactive ability to buy, long-term changes, and accountability as like broad categories. And then we can also give some specific examples. And the thing that I like about that is that as we're having this expanded conversation with the community, that makes it broader, right? Like if you say we're talking about accountability, that opens it up for a much more rich conversation, in my view, right? Like we can name some specific things like, you know, withholding rent might fall under that, or not being able to go through a summary ejection. But when we present people with like just a broad category, I think that's easier to have more discussion around. That was all I wanted to share. And just to explain, like, that's what I'm typing out here is just like notes. And I'll post the link to this. I'll make it available for everybody to view and post it in the chat so everybody can have access to it.
And more on the conversation of what Yolanda and Wanda were talking about, but want to add the utility costs into it. I want to see if Yuruhu would be willing to voice her thoughts on what she put in the chat, especially around the raised utility costs. Yuruhu, would you like to come off of mute? Hello? Is she there?
Yep, hold on 1 second. Let me make sure I'm hitting the right person. Boom. Okay.
Hey,
Perfect.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon, good evening. Yeah, I put something in the chat about my experience. You know, my rent went from 3 years ago, $575, 1 bedroom, which I could afford, and it doubled. And the way that they did that, you know, I saw like the notes about having written leases. Well, now the leases are 40 pages long. So, you know, we have leases that somebody with my background, having worked in legal services, you know, I struggle with the lease that I have. You know, they're coming from other states. They don't look familiar to us, and they're not in other languages. They're only in English. And so that's an issue. But you know, in the lease, they have, now we have community costs. We have, they're mandating certain services that are voluntary, like trash pickup that nobody uses, right? But we pay $10 extra a month for that. Now $20 extra for something that they've built in. And, you know, the biggest one that I hear about in my community is the water bill. You know, our water bill, my water bill is about $80 a month. I've never experienced that. I've, you know, had a 3-bedroom house and didn't pay as much as $80 a month. And what I learned is that, you know, these big developments, they don't go through the city water. They're not going through those utilities. They're going through a third party, the water. So, you know, even though I'm in Charlotte,
I'm paying my landlord to pay for a third party to offer water services, not to give us water, but to manage our water services. And the cost is incredible. You know, you got people in my community afraid to flush a toilet or take a shower because it's so high. You know, and so those things get looped in with the rent. And, you know, you go from $575 to $1,200 or, you know, something like that in 3 years. My rent is going up a lot more slowly because of, you know, I'm opting into to the chances that I'm given. But I do have to leave because that's going to run out. You know, I think it's important to look at these leases, these 40-page leases, you know, as we're developing policy together, and really look at those red flags that, you know, that appear in these leases and opportunities we have to hold these folks accountable. Because when it comes to accountability in and of itself, you know, I'm in the process with Utilities Commission, and I'm not, there's not a lot of response. You know, they refer me back to my landlord. Now that's a concern when you go to the Utilities Commission to make a complaint and to make an investigation, and they refer you and copy you back to the party that you are complaining about. It's not safe out here, you know, to do this fight without collective action.
That's right. That's right. And thank you for that. Thank you for sharing. And that's what this is all about, collective action. And that goes back to what our sister Javita Lee was talking about, the utility justice. So housing just is not just about, hey, having a safe place to lay your head. It involves environmental justice and utility justice and also fair housing and also many things. Is there someone else with their hand up?
Yeah, Wanda, Felicia, I just gave you access. You can
you know what? Look at my ESP. Well, look at that right there. My little, what's that little thing right there? When you have, never mind, I'm going to another thing. I was going to call on you, Felicia, because my point was when I move forward was going to be about, you know, now we're talking about all these things. And I know Jamie put in the chat that rent control is, you know, the legislation, y'all legislators said that, you know, rent control is not legal here in the state of North Carolina. But, you know, I feel like we can change that, you know, marijuana and what is the thing when we go do them little scratch offs at the convenience store, and I know I ain't the only one who does that. You know, that was illegal at some point. And now, so if that's legal, guess what? Rent control can be legal. So yes, Felicia, yes, what would you like to speak on?
Yes. Good afternoon. First of all, I have to get a shout out to April Lewis and Jessica Moreno. Hey, ladies, Action and Steve Torch. Well, I agree with everything y'all saying. They're trying to keep the rich richer and the poor poorer. And just like the lady was saying, it's crazy. I'm going through it right now as we speak. I am being kicked out of my apartment complex because it's between the city of Jacksonville and Tarantino Property Management. The city has gave them X amount of days to get these apartments up to code. These apartments were built in 1950s. These were the first base housing of Jacksonville, North Carolina. And we have so many code enforcements era. These apartments are crazy. So they're kicking us out, putting us on the street. And thanks to April and Jessica, you know, I'm getting up with them and like, hey, you know, I give them my information, told them a little bit about what's going on. And so far we have created a torch here in Jacksonville, North Carolina for Town Center Apartments. And I've spoken with so many people. We done went through so many council meetings and stuff like that. And it's like, you know, what we're trying to do is let Tarantino Property know, like, look, y'all got all this money. Y'all trying to kick us out. Can't nobody be kicked out at a time. It's about to be winter. And we still in a hurricane. Kids still in school. They don't care about our kids' education. They don't care about nothing. All they care about is them dollars. And this is definitely wrong. Like everything on this list, I agree. But my main thing is I'm tired of keeping the rich richer and the poor poor while I'm living here in a 3-bedroom apartment. My floor is caving in. Come on now. This got to be different. I'm like anybody else. I got credit challenges like crazy. But guess what? I think I deserve a second chance if I'm ready to go pursue and buy a house for me and my family. I can't do that because of something that was done when I was 16. So yeah, it's crazy, but thank the Lord, I'm getting through it day by day. I just purchased 2 trailers, 2 mobile homes. So I'm thankful that I'm getting up out of here, but this is not going to end. This is not going to end.
Yes, yes. Welcome to the fight, my sister Felicia. Welcome, Onslow County. They don't know, but they hey, welcome, welcome. You know, it's always something when it comes to the oppressor. Our ancestors and elders went through it, and now we're going through it, and we're gonna keep on keeping on. And I know it's hard sometimes, but again, as you know, you've heard, we have to stand in solidarity with each other and lift each other up. And I'm so glad April and Lord, I forgot the name. Jessica was there for you and went to Onslow County and stood there for you. So thank you for doing that. And that's what it's about. So is there anyone else with their hand up before we move on? We have about 5 more minutes to hear from others.
And then, yes, we have one more. And I'm sorry, I want to make sure I pronounce your name correctly. It's Hawa. Wang.
Wang, yes.
Hey, thanks. You pronounced it perfectly. Thank you. No worries. Yeah. I just want to say, first of all, thanks for organizing this imaginary session. I think this Bill of Rights is going to help many people who do work locally to establish some sort of platform that we can hopefully bring to our local elected officials, say, here's what we want to see. Can you do this? Also, I just want to follow up from what Felicia said about the whole rich getting richer and poor getting poorer. One thing that bothers me is, as we're doing this work, the destruction is happening all around us as we're talking, because they're going to find, they move fast. They move fast. The industry moves fast. That's what I just had a discussion with Rosa Haas Mustafa, who's also with us. The industry moves fast, and we have to pick up the pace somehow. And I feel like one thing that bothers me is even if we take back the power from the oppressor, many of them still get a cash out, and that I don't like. And basically, if they get to cash out and run and walk away from North Carolina and never come back and get to enjoy their spoils or what have you, we're left with very little to work with still. So this is why I feel really strongly that we need some level of accountability, even if it means I'm not sure what it means. I'm just brainstorming, taxing the developers and the people who got contracts with developers that built to exploit, impact the communities, make them having to pay off some massive portion of the profit back to the community as a way to repay. I mean, that's the only way I can think of that can hold them accountable. We can keep brainstorming this I just feel very strongly that some level of accountability has to be called for. Just like reparation is hundreds of years overdue.
100% reparations now. That is for certain. We have 3 minutes left. Is there anyone left with their hands up? If not, I'm going to call on someone to close us out on their thoughts on what they think should most definitely be in that top 10 and speak to it. So let me see who we have left up here.
I think Bree has one more thing to add.
Okay, Bree.
Yeah. Yeah, so 100% to everything Quad just said. And I just wanted to remind everybody, I love the language that you used about establishing a platform. Yes, like I think that is the perfect way to put what we're talking about, is like really making it very clear what that thing is that we are pushing for. And a reminder that this is happening nationally. So even though we're having this conversation as organizers in North Carolina, we're also going to continue to do this building nationwide. So they can't just take that money and run to another state, because they're going to find the same resistance wherever they go. And I think realistically, it has to be a national, I mean, it's a global struggle, really, right? We know that, but it has to be like this, it has to be organized mass resistance. And to that point, I also want to lift up what Uhuru said, like, this is not, it's not solely about legislative action. It might not even be about legislative action, because even if they say, no, absolutely not, we are not going to meet any of your demands, then the response is, okay, what do we do now? Like, we have to organize ourselves. We have to be prepared to resist evictions. We have to be prepared to organize and shut things down. But I think, again, the platform is what helps with that, because when we go to folks and we say, we're going to resist evictions, we have to have like that platform and that vision, that unified vision around what we are building towards as the alternative to this system that we're under right now. So I just wanted to basically just say amen to what I had seen there.
One of the things I wanted to hear a little bit more about is rent control. And I know, like I said, it's not something that's permissible here because of law, but Erica, are you still on the call? I know you're from like up north, but you're being here down south, but you experience rent control from living up there, or at least know more about it. Can you speak on that and give us some idea of the benefits of rent control from your experience or your family experience?
And Wanda, I'm not sure if I see Erica on there. So Erica, if you are on, she may have jumped off a little early.
Oh, she's not on here anymore. Okay.
She just jumped off.
Okay. Well, if Erica's no longer on here, I guess that is it. We are at the time of 7:10. And so what I'm going to do is turn it back over to Bree, and we're going to discuss the campaign going forward, how we're going to build from here. We're gonna we just open up the floor for your comments on the top 10, but now, like, if you have more questions or suggestions for Bree on to determine these top 10 that we come to, how we're just going to, narrow it down further in discussion with Bree. And so we're going to use the next 30 to 40 minutes on that. So wakey up. Come on, raise your hand, come off of mute, or say stack or whatever, because this is for our communities. This is for our people. This is for the people we stand in solidarity with. So we're not only just speaking for ourselves, we're speaking for them. So please speak up so we can make sure we capture all of this. And also, this is being recorded. So those who are missing this, they'll have an opportunity to go back and listen too. And like Bree said, this is a working document. This isn't something just going to stay still. We'll have an opportunity to add to it, not only on a statewide level, but also on a community level. So please be ready and willing to participate with Bree in this part of the event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wanda. You are the best moderator and host. Like, you keep the energy up. I love it. So I put this screen up again. This is just kind of showing what we were envisioning as the layout of the zine and the elements that would go in it. Where I have right now, where it's highlighted Housing Bill of Rights, top 10 list and additional measures. That's where I'm suggesting maybe we think in terms of categories, like maybe we present it as the categories that we identified tonight, and then give some examples under those categories. That might be a better way to present it. But yeah, we just wanted to have some time to open it up for discussion around this whole thing. I mean, the zine is just an element of it, right? Like the zine is something that helps us to build consensus around a platform and a goal. The zine is something that helps us to have conversations with the people that we are encountering as we are organizing. It's a way to do mass education, mass political education, and systems analysis. And the idea is that we use this to then, invite people into the movements that we are building locally and on a statewide level. Like, I want to show up somewhere, hand this to somebody, have a conversation about it, and then maybe get them to volunteer to do court support or to show up for an eviction blockade or whatever it is that we are doing. So I'm going to stop talking and chatting. I just want to open it up for if people have reactions, questions, thoughts. It can be as specific as the zine. It can be as broad as how we are approaching this whole campaign and this whole effort. Because we did start to get into some of that now. So I'll just open it up. Feel free to type in the chat, raise your hand if you'd like to comment or speak. And I want to lift up too in the chat, if you didn't see, Kaz mentioned an event that SVA is having next Friday, and they have a planning meeting on Monday. So I just wanted to point that out in the chat there as well. Any thoughts, reactions? Does this sound good to people? Does this feel like something that is helpful? Hua raised, yeah. Hua and Thomas look like they both have their hands up. Hua, would you like to go first?
Sure, just real quick, I might have missed it, but just wondering if you're also planning to have website or social media account for people to follow?
Yes. So we plan to have both of those things launch in October. So we'll publish and distribute the zine, and then we'll also have a site that the zine will point you back to. So if you imagine, like, you flip onto the back and there's like a web address you can go to or a QR code you can capture on your phone, and it will take you to the site where you can volunteer to be part of our rapid response network. And we'll also know where people are based. So like, let's say like there's a situation unfolding in Jacksonville right now. If we had a base of people who had already volunteered, they said, if anything's going down in Jacksonville, you can call on me. We would be able to direct those people to the organizers who are mobilizing in Jacksonville. Thomas?
Yeah, I agree with the categorizing, putting it in categories. I think for me anyway, that gives me a clearer vision of how to strategize, how to come up with strategic plans around the different various actions that we need to take. So I think that that would work well as far as us, intermediate and long-term planning, and how to link the two together, how to link the intermediate with the long-term, if we have a clear plan, a strategic plan of how to move forward in those categories.
Awesome, thank you, Thomas. Let's see, Jamie has her hand up, and then Wanda.
Thank you, Bree. It just occurred to me when Wa asked the question that it's not included on what we have so far of the overview of the zine, but we should certainly have a link to the website, and it's at the QR code, so that anybody who sees it would just be directed to our social media account and our website.
Yeah. And one of the other things we talked about too was, again, making it interactive and something that people can continue to build on. So maybe the zine takes you to the site or the social media, and there's a place for you to share your thoughts on, what needs to change as well. And it's like a living document. Wanda, Hunter?
So will the zine be online also?
Yes.
Okay, so what I was going to say is what will really bring life to it is if you connect some stories, some real life stories in those different regions. And then if with those stories, if there's organizing connected to those particular stories in that manner, then people will know if it's in Jacksonville in that particular development, and then how to reach the tort unit in that area. So based on different stories, if people organize, I thought it would be a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Let's see. Qua raised his hand again.
Yeah, sorry. This just occurred to me when you mentioned about mobilizing toward different localities where there's issue. So like for instance, Jacksonville. One thing that came to my mind was, Wanda Kivakoka, Wanda Hunter, and I, and many others in Wake County Housing Justice Coalition, we are currently working toward protecting the Black communities in Heritage Park from getting kicked out. And I was just wondering if we can do some sort of mobilization for that one, because that's also going on.
Yeah, I mean, and anybody else who wants to speak to this, please feel free to jump in. But yes, absolutely. I think one of the things that we have identified is that we have a really great, solid group of people who are doing work. And if you think about the people who are on this particular call right now, and then the people that we are connected to, like there's a solid network of folks doing this work in the state, but we need to build capacity. We need to increase capacity because folks are kind of stretched thin. And so I think the key is how are we bringing more people into the fold so that then we can mobilize to help on things like that. And you're not leaning on the same 20 people to try to do everything. Because I think there's a lot of people who see the issue and they're ready to help. I think it's just creating the pathways for that and building that kind of infrastructure that can sustain a mass mobilization over an extended period of time. I think that's the other thing too. We tend to be good at doing a large mobilization in a short period of time. We've seen that we can do that. And so we know what that could look like if we could really scale that out. It can be significant. And so I think what we're trying to do now is build that infrastructure so we can scale out. Wanda Hunter?
I see you have the state of public housing. And I think that definitely has to be tied into HUD. We're going through some things right now with some public housing that we're organizing, and they've tried to give us the runaround, but we went straight to HUD guidelines and it shut them down. So I think definitely we have to tie that into HUD, because a lot of people don't know about HUD guidelines and the rights that tenants have under HUD guidelines, allowing them to organize, allowing them a lot of different rights, especially with their public housing now trying to change a lot of their public housing to rental assistance demonstration, which means that they wouldn't use Section 8 vouchers. They try to change the housing now, but there are guidelines under that too that gives them the first right back to those properties, that they don't have to go through additional screening to go back to those properties. All of those different types of rights, and those people need to know it, and HUD needs to be attached to that public housing portion.
Absolutely. Let's see.
Now, could I just mention something to that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to add to that, the public housing issue, the whole thing about the rental assistance demonstration is about turning the public into private, right? Or at least partnering with private to give private industry the access to public housing. There is a massive movement going on in New York that I'm aware of, and they're trying to network with people across the country to do a preserving public housing initiative throughout the city, because public housing, people may not realize, is being gentrified as well. It's being gentrified. It's being propositioned off to private developers. So it is a major issue, and it will significantly contribute to homelessness if some of these things go through, like this whole Section 8 voucher program. They're attaching the vouchers now to the units instead of the individuals. So where I used to be able to get a voucher for my family, now that voucher is to the unit. So if they put me out, I lose the voucher.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, there's a lot of insidious stuff going on, and so it's across the board, private, public, all the different housing dynamics are being affected by this.
Absolutely. Let's see, Barbara Smalley McMahon, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, that was very good. Great, thank you. I was thinking about, I think you mentioned, Bree, that how do we get beyond, and we are sort of beyond having just small numbers of us involved in fighting for housing justice, and wondering, how do we attract the media to, and how do we attract a larger following? So I'm just brainstorming out loud here. But I'm thinking about, I've lived in Raleigh long enough to see affordable housing built and affordable housing torn down. And when it was built, it was beautiful. And by the time it was torn down, it was in total disrepair. You talk about the wealth gap. Redlining made sure money didn't go into the Black community and other minority communities, and it remained that way. Money has not gone in for upkeep from Raleigh Housing Authority, other housing authorities throughout other cities throughout the state. And I'm wondering, could we do a before and after picture series of some sort on what the housing looked like when it was built, how many requests have been made for upkeep and maintenance that have been minimally, if at all, responded to? I think the public needs to know this is neglected. Areas get what they call blighted because they're neglected. And then they're torn down, and it's all a scheme. It's all a white domination scheme to act like we're doing something and then wait for the right moment, tear it down, and we can move back in. It's just disgusting. So it's something I'm asking, before and after pictures of some of these affordable housing places where people get out and fight with us for maintenance, true maintenance and upkeep and preservation of affordable housing instead of tear down.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I think it again goes back to the need for documentation. That's something that has come up again and again and again. And I do think that this platform that we're talking about creating and using the Bill of Rights conversation around could serve that, right? Like Wanda Hunter, I'm going to go to you in just a second, but Wanda was talking about the need to have the testimonies from people, right? We could create a way for people to share their personal testimonies. We can do, like you were saying, show the before and after on the situation with public housing. I saw somebody post in the chat about Black mold. That's a major issue, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think there's a way to just like make all of this visible. Is there, but I think it's about making it visible to the point that people can't look away. And I just want to say this last thing, and then I'll go to Wanda. Because I think sometimes it's really easy to focus on the work that is ahead of us. But I just want to remind us, like, we have moved this issue a lot, because I remember like in a lot of ways, people were not talking about housing. It was kind of like an overlooked issue. And I think that the amount of organizing and work that people have done, for a long time, but especially this push in recent years has really forced this issue to the forefront in some ways. So I think as we build capacity and we, build to a larger scale, and we build in a way that can really sustain the effort over time, I think we can make it so that everybody is aware of these things. Yeah. Wanda?
I think Yahuwah raised a good issue also is red flags on leases. And I think that is something that should be raised. And I myself, as a new homeowner, I can talk about how that also happens with home ownership. So for instance, I live in a newly gentrified area, and the purpose for me coming to this area was because of the equity that I gained from owning this home. But along with this owning this home, I have a recapture period because owning this home was through a project through the city. Now, I knew that I was walking into equity, but the skyrocket of how fast the taxes have increased, and things of that nature, if I'm not able to sustain it, then I have a 10-year recapture period. So what that means is every year I step down 10% of what I would get until I get all of the sale from my home. And this, if I was to leave in 5 years, half would go to the city, half would be mine. But at the rate that the taxes are increasing, I could be priced out in 2 to 3 years. So you have to be careful when you have developments and things of that nature. And a lot of times people won't pay attention to it because it was such a good deal. And that was one of the things that I was blindsided on. It was such a good deal, but I didn't think about the recapture period. And I know that this is the case because Habitat for Humanity was going to build homes in this area, and they pulled out because they knew that the clients that they served would not be able to keep up with the tax increases that will come along with having new homes in this area. So they pulled out of the development deal altogether because they knew that their clients would not be able to pay those tax increases coming forward. So I think highlights in the lease agreements, and like I said, in my particular situation, was the recapture period and being aware of things like that when you're purchasing a home or whether you're leasing or renting somewhere.
That's such a good point. And by the way, I know I'm like directly answering questions, but if folks have reactions to anything that's coming up, please feel free to jump in and share your reactions too. I think that is such a good point. And I think that also highlights why it's important that we roll out this Bill of Rights conversation as a broad ongoing conversation, because like just looking at the things that we pulled on tonight, like somebody pointed out how that was very tenant focused, but there's obviously like a lot of other issues that are coming up, the raising of taxes, all the ways that people are cheated by this system. And so I think presenting it in a way where people are able to share these stories and we can identify all the different ways that housing is impacting people. I mean, I've said this before, like I think this really goes to the heart of colonialism in a lot of ways, because that's what it was always about. It was about the struggle over land. It is fundamentally about the struggle between who owns the land and who is forced to pay to, you know, reside on the land, right? So I think that, you know, making it possible for a broad movement, right? Like, I don't think we want a situation where somebody shows up and they say, oh, well, I'm not a tenant. I'm not trying to form a tenant association right now. So this movement's not for me. We want them to look at it and say, oh no, I relate to that, because even though I'm in a home owning situation or my situation is a lease or a mortgage, I see myself in this struggle, you know, and I think we want to present it to people in that way. Yeah. Let's see, Jamie was on Stack.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond quickly to Wanda's comment, and then I had something else, which is that it seems to me that it's an example of what can happen when folks who finally get a chance to own their own house then are still, you know, it seems like owning your own house is the solution to this problem of affordability of housing, because, you know, the dynamic between a landlord and tenant is so uneven. And then there's a story like Wanda's where she's able to purchase a home, and that problem really hasn't been solved because that gentrification and tax issue then basically she could end up losing her home in the long run. So, you know, I guess that goes to your statement about this not being only about tenants, although, you know, I'm always going to have a special place in my heart for, you know, people in that landlord tenant situation. But the other point I wanted to make is that a lot of what's happening when I listen to all of these problems just seems to me to be so based on our General Assembly and their complete failure to provide for people in housing. And posting the statute about rent control was just an example where the state of North Carolina, our General Assembly, has said, the city of Raleigh cannot pass their own rent control statute. And to me, this comes from, I think, a lot of the same people that would have a problem with, think that states' rights is really important. And then they're basically taking the rights from, the government officials that you're most accountable to, and not allowing, our local municipalities or counties to make a law that says, you can't double the rent when somebody's lease ends. And that's just one example. I mean, there's so much more than just rent control. And it's really essential to build this power so that then we can go to our lawmakers and start to demand that they change the laws to be more favorable.
Thank you, Jamie. So I know before we close out of this section, I just wanted to check and see if people have any other thoughts or comments or reactions. Just as a clarification around next steps. So since we are looking to publish this maybe by the end of next month, what I would suggest is that once we kind of have a layout here, we have everybody's contact info when you registered for this, or if you weren't already connected to the statewide network. I'd like to share it out so people have a chance to comment and look at it and, say, is this vibing with what people feel, would be most helpful. And so there will be another opportunity to provide input on this before we go to print. And like I said, this is a living, evolving thing. So it's not like we're not etching anything in stone and then it's never, it can never be modified or changed again. This is a conversation starter. This is a way to build consensus. We're not going to begin with consensus. Consensus is something we build as we go through the struggle and the movement together. Any other thoughts, comments, questions before I hand it back over to Wanda? How are people feeling? Thumbs up, does this feel like a good thing? Thumbs down, questions? Let's see, I thought somebody raised their hand, no? Okay, cool. All right, Miss Wanda, I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, my little setup I had here is falling apart. That's what you get when you're challenged with height sometimes. But also, before I go any further, I know there are a lot of people in here that have a lot of things going on in the housing justice, energy justice, and all the work we do. So please, if you have some event or something coming up we want to support, please put it in the chat. Let us know what you have going on in your area, if you have some type of meeting or some type of event, if you have some type of just information that you think we need to know that's going to educate us, or something, let us know. Let's support, make each other aware, give you an opportunity to put it in the chat. Share emails if you like. Hunter want to know, can we create a calendar? Would you like to answer that, Bree, real quick? Or would you want to answer it in the chat? Okay,
no, sure, I can answer that real quick. So yes, so part of what we are going to have on the site that we create for this is granting access to folks who register. So you could register, like everything that the events that people are sharing here, you can register and post that on the site, and there will be a community calendar there. And I know that SVA does something similar. Like there's a lot of different groups that do something similar, but we are all, I think, as much as possible, trying to make that information everywhere so we can all connect with each other.
Okay. All right. Did everyone get their information in the chat before we move further? And I know Yuru, there's an event coming up too as well in October. Didn't know if you want to put that in the chat. And so last but not least, we have another treat for you all to go out on. Give us more energy to fight the powers that be. We're going to ask Yolanda to lead us in closing again. And we're going to have a special treat with her husband. Do I say right? Is it the poetic drummer? Correct me, Yolanda, if I'm wrong.
He's the drum prophet.
The drum prophet. I done came up with a new name. The drum prophet is gonna join us. Now this time you all can come off of mute and show your faces so we can all come together and jam together and groove together in the same beat. If you can't stay on beat, watch your neighbor. And we're just gonna do it together the best we can. So let's see faces. I'm watching. Where is everybody?
No, if I can.
Jessica, come on. I've seen you. In fact, you can sing, Jessica. I've seen you. And I know Jessica can sing. You might have to belt out something, Jessica. So come on, y'all. Who else is here?
I don't see a camera option on my end. I just see the microphone.
You don't see stop video?
Yeah, for the panelists, we can allow them to come off mute, but they won't be able to join via camera this time, though.
Oh, see, y'all, you know what?
Yeah, because I was thinking about that too. I was like, come off mute, but I can't go mute.
Y'all see, y'all got it this time. Y'all were able this time to cheat. But that's all right. I'll get it in for y'all.
Y'all better hurry up because the drum prophet was about to go to sleep.
Oh, no. Oh, drum prophet, no. Wake up.
I had to yell for him to come downstairs. Okay. Well, thank you all. And I just want everyone, in order to close out, and he's going to play music, I want everyone to say one word that expresses how they feel about this imagining session. Like, how are you leaving? One word. So, Wanda, you want to help me call them out?
Yes. Enlighten. Jasmine.
Energized.
Felicia.
Powerful.
Greg.
Phenomenal.
Jamie.
Inspired.
Bree.
Lifted.
Thomas.
Thomas.
Motivational.
Martardo. Might be still on mute. I'll go to Kaz.
Ready.
Jessica. Come off mute, Jessica. Felipe.
Beautiful.
Wanda Hunter.
Liberated.
GQ.
Helpful.
Yuruhu.
Activated.
Wow.
Revolution.
Barbara.
Beautiful. I love that word. Beautiful.
Stephanie Harris. Tammy.
United.
Erica.
Hopeful.
Carol.
Fired up. Ready to go.
Hey, Kristen.
Powerful.
Norma. Okay, if somebody didn't speak up, shout it out now. But we're gonna move on. Hey.
Mobilize. I feel mobilized.
Mobilize. We ready.
It's the rhythm of life. It's the rhythm of life. Somebody told me that you got rhythm. Yeah, 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 Stars speaking life. It's the rhythm of life.
Come on, Jamie, I see you.
I need you, you need me, we need each other. Come on. Another day, another dollar. Society, oh, I wanna holler. Come on. A beggar. I reach hands, I had to take a stand as I continue on my way. That's when I heard him say, please, I beg of thee, don't ignore me, no, no, no. I'm at your mercy, can you see? Yeah. No, why?
Hey!
Yes.
Thank you.
That's what I'm talking about. Yes, we have our own Gil Scott Heron. Hey, the revolution will be televised on Zoom.
Yes.
Hey, yes. We'd like to thank each and every one of you for giving us your time and energy. I know it seemed like a long time, but we got it in. We're going to get this down. We're going to write the vision. We're going to make it plain for those who pretend they don't know already. They're going to know. We're going to create policies and whatever else we need to know on the grassroots level and all the way city and statewide, even national. We're gonna let them know. One day, y'all, we're gonna be standing up there with Cory Bush and all of them, letting them know what we're talking about in case they don't know. You see this bridge right here behind me? We're gonna shut down this bridge, gonna speak it into existence. But thank you for the power. Thank you for the people. I appreciate each and every one of y'all. Like I said before, I do not take it lightly. You all are freedom fighters. You all stand in the gap for those who are not able to stand at all. I look forward to meeting you all for the next events. Please make sure you posted those in there for us to attend, for those who can attend. I thank Greg again. I thank GQ and Jasmine, because, hey, y'all saw a lot of us, but believe me, we had a lot of background help. So thank you. Thank you, Bree. She was the captain of our ship. And we were just the co-pilots. And thank you to all the presenters, Jamie, LA, Jovita, April and Jessica, Yolanda, and Kenya Myers. Am I forgetting someone? I think those are all. Who else?
LA and Jovita.
Yeah, LA and Jovita. Yeah, I said them.
Okay.
Okay. So, and Yolanda, yes, thank you for all our presenters, and thank you all for coming. We're going to wish you all a good night. Be safe.
Thank you, Wanda.
Yeah, thank you, Wanda.
Thank you, Wanda.
Oh,
good job, Wandy.
Wanda.
You made it fun.
Yes. Thank you, Wanda.
Thank you, Miss Wanda.
Great job. Great job.
Erica calling out my stage name.